I would love to also preach on that New Testament passage from James. There's so much in that I would love to comment on, but you can't say it all, you can't fit it all in, and I've chosen to focus on the gospel passage. And I want to just begin by throwing out two questions. Is it really important that Christians have significant agreement on who Jesus is? Can we not all just come to our own conclusions about Jesus? The consistent argument from almost every Christian source through the centuries is to say unequivocally, yes, we do need agreement on who Jesus is. No, we cannot just be left to draw our own conclusions. Before I even move on, let me put a disclaimer here. You will not hear me today or on any other occasion suggesting that people must be forced to believe something. But if I am to call myself a Christian, or anyone else is to call themselves a Christian, it does mean something specific, not something vague. Like going to the supermarket and you pick this brand and I pick that brand, and you just pick and choose exactly what you want. Allow me to expand. There are issues of controversy within the Christian community. You know that as well as I do. And on many of the issues, and even those where there's no controversy, but just simply difference, there's no major problem, or we can allow lots of latitude. We have differences of culture and worldview, how I see the world, which is based on everything from my personality to my experience of growing up and where I have grown up and how I have been raised and so on. All my ways of understanding and perceiving, my different life experiences. That's one of the reasons that we have many different types of churches and different focus, different emphases, varying worship styles, different historical backgrounds. Yes, there are lots of reasons for those, and I'm not majoring on that. That's not the point of what I'm talking about now, but I'm just acknowledging that there are many different ways and styles of doing things within the Christian community. People will sometimes talk about differences between some of the denominations. And I say, well, even if you were just to pick, say, 10 Anglican churches within a circumference of here, and visit each of them on a different Sunday, every single one of those churches would do things slightly differently. Even if they're using the same prayer book for Australia, and some will use slightly different prayers, some will include this, some will leave that out. There will be different types of music. Some, a future, not many these days, some will use incense and have lots of symbols. Others will be very much simpler in terms of symbols, and so on. But none of those things are about the essence of our Christian faith. Those are just aspects of how we express them and how we choose to worship and do things when we come together. In terms of what we believe, there is far more that unites us than that which divides different Christian groups. And what unites us also is one of those issues about who Jesus is. Now again, I say, yes, it is really important that we have significant agreement on who Jesus is. In the early centuries of the Christian era, there were varied perceptions. People didn't just come to follow Jesus from an empty background. Most already had a religion, or at least a philosophical perspective. The Greek culture was dominant in the Middle East at that time. Greek was the international language in the way that English is today. Now, many Greeks and lots of the cultures also impacted by the Greeks battled with the idea that Jesus could be both fully human and fully God. The Greeks had many gods, male and female deities, and they had stories about who they were and how they did things. But they were also sure that gods were far removed from human existence. They observed what went on earth, but they weren't involved in our daily lives. To many Greeks, even those who were attracted by the story of Jesus, to many of them the idea that God would take on human form and come and exist at a much lower, imperfect level of amongst humans, rather than enjoying status as a god, that was a preposterous idea. Now, many Greek people became Christians. A large number of the early Christians were Greeks. They saw and heard the story of Jesus, and they believed in Jesus. But still, it took a while for people to think these issues through. Why? Because they came at it from this deeply held perspective in which they had been raised, of God being somehow far away. But in Jesus, we were celebrating God who'd come into human form and who took on human form, but was still God. So for some, it was a struggle to get around that. And when you read some of the history of the early church, that was one of the issues that often arose for discussion. But Jewish people also had issues to deal with. As you would know, they were amongst the earliest followers. The immediate disciples of Jesus were Jews, and the Jews were Jesus' own ethnic group, if you can put it in that term. Now, many Jews could see that Jesus fulfilled the words of their prophets from centuries before about a special suffering servant of God. But there were some who were disappointed. Some were disappointed that Jesus didn't vanquish the Roman Empire and make Israel a powerful kingdom again. And others who decided not to follow Jesus, it was precisely because he claimed to be God and from God and to be one with God that they struggled with that. To an Orthodox believing Jew, that was blasphemy. So the earliest Jewish followers were ones who were able to work through that and say, but the one we have seen, this Jesus we have seen, is no ordinary person. What Jesus has said and what Jesus has done are different. And in time, many could come to see how Jesus fulfilled the expectations of the prophets. But those early Christian, those early followers of Jesus who were Jewish had to work through all that. But the testimony of the early church grew and developed as people discussed some of these issues and even some of the controversies that arose. The great minds, the great intellects of the time, the first and second and third and fourth centuries, applied their minds to these things over time, seriously and consistently, in answering this question that Jesus also put to his disciples: who do you say that I am? And their testimony was based on the teaching of Jesus and the experience of the apostles, who were his close associates, and also those who were witnesses to his resurrection. They bear consistent witness as to who Jesus is. Some of those were put to death. They were, as you will know, you will have often heard it mentioned, how some of the early Christian people were put to death, not all of them, but there were waves of persecution. It depended who the emperor was in Rome. At times they were very casual about other religions and other faiths. At times they were very specific. And Caesar in Rome was the one to be worshipped. And if you said that Jesus was your Lord, that was a problem. It's not possible then to be a Christian and patronizingly refer to Jesus as just a good man, or another of the many prophets, or a clever teacher, but just one among many. Although I don't have this in my notes, I meant to put in, just to add a note here about the creed. The Nicene Creed that we say in our service Sunday by Sunday was from a coming together of leadership of the church in the 4th century, the 300s, and it wasn't just one gathering. It was a follow-on to many other gatherings that had happened when leaders of the church came together and listed those things that were critical for people to understand if they were followers of Jesus. There are some people, some groups, who are close to the Christian faith, but are not Christians, or they do not adhere to the creed. They do not believe in the creed. Mormons, for instance, they call themselves the Church of the Latter-day Saints of Jesus Christ. But essentially they do not hold to those beliefs as set out in the Nicene Creed. And so they do not include themselves amongst the general Christian body. But the creed is something that draws together Christians of every type and color and persuasion and through the ages. Of course, there are many responses of people to Jesus. There's a variety of responses. People of other faiths, people who even don't necessarily say they believe in Jesus. I personally feel no need to be negatively critical of other faiths or the beliefs of others. I observe how they regard God or the divine. I'm broadly familiar with the Muslim and Hindu religions. In the Muslim faith, they say that they honor Jesus. They use the Arabic name for Jesus, Isa. And if you go to many countries where Arabic is the language, the Christian people there use the word Isa and Allah, the word for God. So you will hear those words in the Christian communities in the Arabic language. And they say that the Muslim people say that they honor Isa, but they do not regard Isa as the Son of God or a Messiah or a Savior. I know a little about Buddhism. One of my sisters turned to Buddhism after a great disappointment in the church and in her personal life. And we've had interesting conversations over the years. Buddhism has no formal belief in a deity. There is no God in Buddhism. So it's also different in that respect from many religions. It's a philosophy of life with a deeply spiritual focus, and a very beautiful one, and much that resonates with our Christian faith. These days there are many in affluent first world nations who claim to have no belief in God of any sort, or no religion. I'm sure you're aware of that. There will be people in your own families in that place, and we read about it often, many discussions of that. It's common in Australia and New Zealand, it's common in North America and in Europe. We need to acknowledge that many people have had a very negative or damaging presentation of Jesus, one that has significantly departed from the historical and biblical record. Such people cannot be expected to express belief in a harmful Jesus that is not connected to the Jesus as known through history. There have been dreadful divides within Christianity of varying groups trying to decide who's in and who's out. Often it has more to do with personalities and egos and the uglier side of sinful human nature. But having said all that, it's important because of the claims that Jesus makes and that his immediate followers make, making a strong case that Jesus is the one promised by the prophets and awaited for centuries. There would be no integrity to the Christian faith if we sidestepped that. I have printed for you, and I think most of you picked one up as you came in. It was there on the table outside with the leaflets. You don't have to refer to it now. If you did not pick one up, please collect one as you go out. It's just a single page, a reflection, if you like, of one, or a meditation, one short piece. And then another listed as an affirmation of faith. And perhaps you may find that useful, and it is a reminder of some of the things that are said generally about Jesus, and also some of the things that we as followers of Jesus say and affirm in our faith, not only in the creed, but in fact through our whole service. I know some people like the creed to be said every Sunday, and the instructions from our prayer book are that at least on main services on Sundays the creed should be said. Never bothers me if on occasion it isn't said, because if you think about it, this whole act of worship from the moment we began until the moment you are sent out is a creed, a statement of what we believe. When you listen to the prayer that the priest uses at the altar, when you listen to the words of the songs, when you listen to the words of our liturgy, we are stating not only what we believe, but in whom we believe. So just as Jesus asked his disciples, not only who do all the people out there say I am, but then very specifically asked them, who do you say I am? We are mindful of what it is that we say and who it is that we say Jesus is. And as we continue in our worship, we are reminded of that. This is not a criticism of those who are uncertain. It's quite okay. People sometimes are uncertain. It's not a criticism of people who have questions. I don't think there's a human being alive who has full cognitive abilities who does not at some point and in some way have questions, some of which are quite easy to deal with and some of which remain unanswered for all of us. It's not a criticism of people who struggle with faith in Jesus because of damaging experience. And being a follower of Jesus, as is sometimes put, doesn't mean that you have to park your brain at the door before you come in. We're able to think through these issues, and that's precisely what the early Christian leaders did from different groups and different cultures and different religious backgrounds as they came to acknowledge Jesus as the Messiah, the Son of God, and to be quite clear about what we believe and who Jesus is. Amen.